Today we're talking about two groups of federal workers. They're in different agencies, and the staff shortages are hurting them both. But Congress could be on the way to save them. This is happening in the Veteran Affairs and the Bureau of Prisons. It could also expand to other agencies. Let's get into it. Let's start with the Veteran Affairs, or VA. Picture this, over 200,000 military veterans are waiting for a decision on their benefits. That's almost 250,000 people. Then at the Bureau of Prisons, you have correction officers that are struggling with PTSD, they're struggling with depression, and they have alarming suicide rates that'll make your head spin. First, let's take a look at the VA's Board of Veterans Appeals, or BVA. This is the team that handles appeals when veterans disagree with the VA's decision about their benefits. This could be health care. This could be a disability payment. These are benefits that veterans earn through their blood, sweat, and tears. And the problem here is there's a backlog of 200,000 cases. Every year, the BVA, they get cases completed, but it's never enough. The backlog keeps building and building. This isn't a new headache. The BVA has been dealing with staff shortages and backlog overload for years now. And if you look back a couple of years, they had about 1,300 people that worked in the BVA. This includes positions like attorney advisors, case analysts, and support staff. They were able to recruit largely thanks to telework as a benefit, as a perk. Well, now that's off the table. When telework was there, their attrition rate was still 8.5%, which is almost double that of any other federal agency. Now that tells you one or two things. Either that's a highly stressful environment, or there's no room for development. There's no room for growth. Or maybe it could be a combination of the two. So that's essentially 1 out of 10 employees that are walking out the door every year. Now we have Congressional Representative Gus from Florida saying the veteran appeals backlog unnecessarily delays our nation's heroes from accessing the benefits they've earned. This congressional representative is actually a Republican. Can you imagine waiting years to get your benefits? In this country currently, we have 18 million veterans. That makes up 6% of the entire population. 6% are veterans. 2/3 of that population never filed a disability claim with the VA. Even though they might have scars, they might have burns, they might have PTSD, they might have a whole range of issues, but they're not filing. I met a guy recently that was in his late 50s. He did over 20 years in the Army, infantry, so a combat occupation. He was a captain. He transitioned from enlisted to captain towards the end of his career. He never even thought about it. When he left, he didn't want to worry about disability. He was trying to get into his next career. He jumped into a defense contracting job, and he was doing that for a period of time. And I asked him, he used to complain about his knee, his back. I'm like, have you ever filed a disability claim? He's like, no, I don't want to worry about that. I'm like, all the missions that you've done in Afghanistan and Iraq, you never even thought to file it? He's like, no, I'll probably get around to it later. When is later? He's in his late 50s. What are we talking about later? Mid-60s? Late 60s? Is that later? And a lot of people will say the longer you wait to file, the more difficult it can potentially be. So you need to file when you're getting out of the military or shortly after. Okay, so what's the fix? Well, apparently it's HR 2303. This is the Attorney Retention and Backlog Reduction Act. What's the plan? Well, they want to bump up the attorney's salary. That's the plan. So the BVA attorneys, they're currently GS-14s. They want to make them GS-15s. So that's a potential $30,000 a year increase. That will take an attorney's salary up to probably about $190,000, somewhere around $190,000. That's pretty good, right? But there are some attorneys, let's say you take an attorney with 10 plus years of experience, somebody, let's look at the top 25% attorneys, they're going to be pulling $200,000, $300,000 a year on average, depending in what capacity do they work. So you're not going to get the absolute best and brightest by having a pay ceiling to $190,000 a year. You're just not going to get that. The pay increase is also paired up with this accountability measure to make sure they're not being idle. So all of this is because BVA has been losing their talent to other jobs with better stability, other jobs that have better pay. Okay, so how does the BVA even work Well, thanks to the Veterans Appeal Improvement and Modernization Act of 2017, veterans now have 3 different ways when they are filing their appeal. Number 1 is direct review, takes 314 days. Number 2 is new evidence, takes 695 days. Or they can request a hearing, that takes 927 days. That's over 2.5 years just to get a hearing. So as you can imagine, most veterans, they're going to go ahead and accept the direct review route. So you file a notice of disagreement with the VA form 10182, pick your lane, and you wait. They currently have 125 veteran law judges, which is an increase from 2018 when they only had 92. But it still takes a long time to crank through these cases. All right, now let's pivot to the Bureau of Prisons, or BOP. These people manage federal lockups, corrections. They're dealing with staff shortages. They are dealing with excessive overtimes, dangerous environments, seeing things on a daily basis that could probably give you nightmares. The Government Accountability Office slapped the BOP on its high-risk list in 2023 because vacancies are a serious threat to safety. But it's not just physical danger. Mental health is the silent killer here. The Vera Institute of Justice says correction officers suffer PTSD and suicide at higher rates than other law enforcement and military. Depression, PTSD, suicidal thoughts, that's the norm here. You're working 50-plus hour weeks. You're surrounded by violence, trauma, stress. It wears down on a person. And then there's Officer Blake Suarez. He worked at Thomas Federal Prison in Illinois and took his own life in 2023. He was a father and a husband. And like a lot of people, he kept a lot of stuff on the inside. He showed up to work on time. His coworkers could rely upon him. But eventually that stuff had to come out. And one day he decided it was too much and he took his own life. And because of that story, there's a new bill associated with it. It's the H.R. 2305, the Blake Suarez Suicide Prevention Act. It's named after Blake, and it essentially provides about $300 million for mental health when it comes to our correctional officers. So previously, a lot of correctional officers, if they wanted to get some sort of therapy, if they wanted to get some sort of help, they had to go into their own pocket. Now this provides resources that can make it easier, that can provide this type of service, this type of therapy, what is needed when it comes to dealing with mental health issues. It makes a lot of sense based on the work that they're doing on a daily basis. The union's all in. Their president says federal correction officers work in some of the most dangerous and violent places imaginable. Many of these workers in BOP as correctional officers and otherwise, they're veterans. Veterans have a higher probability to have PTSD, depression, anxiety, based on their deployments, based on the training that they actually have to conduct on a routine basis. So you're already taking somebody from a veteran background and now you're exposing them to more trauma. And there's this misconception in the veteran community and in the military community that if you had a combat occupation, that the only thing that you can do as you transition is either work in security or work in law enforcement. And that is absolutely not true, but you hear it time and time again. People try to become Border Patrol agents, not saying there's anything wrong with it, or they try to work at their local police department. But an individual that wore the uniform in the Army, Marines, Navy, does not matter. They pick up other transferable skills that are not highlighted, that are not talked about as much. They're looking at spreadsheets. They're looking at PowerPoint slides. They are dealing with logistics and training. There's so many other areas that you can expand into. Do not feel that if you're a veteran, the only thing that you can do is security and law enforcement. You can do so much more than that. So this bill is a lifeline not just for them, but also the contractors that work for BOP. Now, despite the VA and BOP, they're both struggling, right? On top of this, they also have to deal with layoffs. The VA is cutting 15%, which means tens of thousands of people are going to be fired. And the BOP, they're looking at it a different way. They've closed some prisons down, but the BOP, what they're doing is they're going ahead and they're going to chop 25% off your salary right off the top. Because there was a retention pay bonus, 25%, they're getting rid of all of that. Despite that, they're still hiring, even though we are in the middle of a hiring freeze. If you go on usajobs.gov right now, look at the VA. There's over 2,000 jobs available. Anybody who has U.S. citizenship, they can apply. Most of these jobs are in the medical field. So you're going to find most of them in the 0600 job series. Then look at BOP. You have jobs here. There's over 200. This is the Department of Justice. Right underneath the Department of Justice, you'll find correctional officer positions. That's the 0007 job series. And there's also administrative jobs here that support the function. So in the 0300, if you have an admin background, you can apply to these jobs. The thing to look at on usajobs.gov is when was the job posted? That'll tell you a lot about whether or not they're impacted by the hiring freeze. Another thing you can look at is as you're reading the job announcement, a lot of these job announcements now, they'll say in there, this is a mission critical position, or this is an essential position. So that sends a signal to you as the applicant that if you apply, they're not just going to pull the job or you're not going to get laid off from 1 week to the next. So that's something to look out for. Speaking of changes to the federal workforce, there was a memo the president signed not too long ago, and this gives OPM even more authority, especially when it comes to firing federal employees. In fact, in this memo, it says that agencies have 5 days to comply. That's it, 5 days. And they're also expanding what misconduct and performance can actually mean. So if you want to know more about that, check this video out next. Stay updated by signing up to the free newsletter down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.